This video will introduce you to Estonia, its history and culture. During your time on Opka Brit, you will work alongside Estonian troops and you will no doubt meet plenty of Estonians when you travel around the country. The video is a British view, born of the experience of 8 months of living and working in Estonia. It is not an Estonian one. Estonia is located on the Baltic coast. It is bordered by the Baltic Sea to the north and west, by Latvia in the south, and by Russia in the east. The country covers 17,000 square miles and is about 5 times smaller than the United Kingdom. It is home to a population of 1.3 million people. This map shows how empty most of the country is, with red areas being more heavily populated. Of these people, around 70% are ethnically Estonian, 26% of the population are ethnically Russian, and the remaining 4% mostly hail from other Baltic and Nordic countries. This map shows the Russian proportion of the population as the darker green areas. Fortunately, many people, especially the young, speak English. The climate is considered to be temperate, the summers being described as cool and the winters as moderate, but do not be fooled into thinking it is the same as the United Kingdom. Although the summer and autumn are similar, the snow usually comes in late October and remains until March, with snowfall continuing into April and May. The temperature can drop as low as -35 degrees and is routinely well below zero throughout this time. Estonia is heavily wooded. 50% of the country is covered predominantly in coniferous forest, but 22% of the mainland is covered in swamps or bogs. There are approximately 1,500 lakes, ranging from ponds to the enormous Lake Peipus that defines much of the country's eastern border with Russia, and there are 2,222 islands. Although the population is dispersed across the country, they are centralised in towns and cities. The ones you need to be aware of are Tallinn. With just over 400,000 inhabitants, the capital city is home to over a third of the population and continues to grow. Split into the medieval Old Town and the sprawling New Town, it has everything one would expect of a European capital. This is where Commander AFP and the British Embassy are based, and you will no doubt visit during your tour. Tartu, the second city. A centre of learning, it is home to both the Baltic Defence College and the only classical university in Estonia, one of the best in Eastern Europe. It was a closed city during the Soviet era due to the large bomber base located there. Now, the aircraft have departed, the runway is the location of the monolithic National Museum of Estonia. Pärnu, the summer capital. This sleepy seaside town becomes the beach holiday mecca of the Baltics in the summer months. Narva, dominated by the twin fortresses that overlook the Friendship Bridge over the river, Narva is a city in decline. The former centre of Soviet textile manufacturing, the predominantly Russian-speaking population have seen a sharp drop in opportunity since Estonian independence, something which the Estonian government is working hard to address. Narva was the site of vicious fighting in 1944. It is somewhere you are likely to visit on a battlefield study. Tapa, your home for the duration of your tour. Tapa sits at a major junction of Estonia's railway lines. Tapa Camp has been heavily invested in by the Estonian government, and the area will continue to develop during your time. It is worth noting that when you are in Tapa, you are 80 miles from the Russian border, less than 7 minutes flight time. Estonia was first settled in around 8,500 BC and has been inhabited ever since. The Northern Crusades of the 13th century marked the start of a period of unrest for Estonia. Invaded by the Danes, the Livonian Order, and the Teutonic Knights, Estonia became a battlefield for the large powers of the day. In 1418, Estonia fell under control of the Livonian Confederation until the Livonian War of 1558 to 1583, when it was lost to the Swedish Empire. The Great Northern War of 1710 to 1721 saw Estonia change hands once again and become Russian territory for the next 200 years. The Estonian national awakening started in the middle of the 19th century and resulted in the increased sense of national identity. Consequently, when the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, Estonia declared independence on the 13th of February 1918. But Estonian independence was not assured, and the Estonian people had to fight for it. During the ensuing War of Independence, the emergent Estonian nation fought on 2 fronts against the Bolshevik Russian forces to the east and Baltic German forces to the south. With support and aid from Finland and the United Kingdom, the Estonian forces triumphed, and the Peace Treaty of Tartu was signed on the 2nd of February 1920, guaranteeing Estonian independence. Sadly, this only lasted for 22 years. Estonia became a battlefield once again during the Second World War. On the 16th of June 1940, the Soviet Union invaded Estonia, which was formally annexed into the Soviet Union on the 6th of August 1940. The occupation was brutal. Tens of thousands were deported, many never to be seen again. Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941 and reached Estonia in July of the same year, but the misery continued. Between 1,500 and 2,000 Estonian Jews, alongside a further 8,000 Jews from the rest of Europe, were executed in camps in Estonia during the Nazi occupation. By 1944, the German army was in withdrawal. As the risk of another Soviet occupation grew, 38,000 volunteers joined the Territorial Defence Force and more joined the SS. Fierce fighting blunted the Soviet advance for 6 months before sheer numbers overcame the Nazi defence. Tallinn was reoccupied on the 22nd of September 1944. The reoccupation was met with fierce Estonian resistance, which was met in return with Soviet reprisals. 20,000 people were deported in March 1949, and the resistance was crushed by the early 1950s. A policy of repression followed, with almost all ethnically Estonian societies, newspapers, and organisations being closed. At the same time, ethnic Russians were encouraged to settle in Estonia. The towns of Paldiski, Sillamäe, and Narva were ethnically cleansed and to be repopulated by Russian colonists. Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika allowed increased access to the Western media and increased political and religious freedoms, which in turn led to a heightened sense of dissatisfaction across the Baltic states. Public protests coalesced into the Singing Revolution, a series of protests where the singing of previously banned nationalistic songs spread across Estonia. Of particular note is the Baltic Way, a peaceful protest in 1989 which saw over 2 million people join hands in a chain from Vilnius in Lithuania through Riga in Latvia to Tallinn. In 1991, tanks were deployed in an attempt to halt progress towards independence. People acted as human shields to protect radio and TV stations, and the Soviet efforts failed. On the 20th of August 1991, independence was declared. In 2004, Estonia was granted EU and NATO membership. Rising concern over Russian intentions as a result from the 2008 Russo-Georgian War and the 2014 annexation of the Crimea and the ongoing war in Ukraine led to the decision to establish a NATO enhanced forward presence in the Baltic states and Poland. The United Kingdom have led the EFP battle group in Estonia ever since. It should come as no surprise that Estonian culture, rooted in their past, is different to the culture in the United Kingdom. The first written record of the Estonian language dates from the 13th century. However, it was in the 19th century, alongside the period of national awakening, that the modern Estonian poetry and writing began in earnest. While many physical parts of Estonian history may have been destroyed, the language has survived. Estonian was also the language of protest during the Soviet occupation. All the nationalistic songs sung during the Singing Revolution were in Estonian. This is celebrated every 5 years during the UNESCO-recognised Estonian Song and Dance Festival, attended by over 10% of the population at any one time. Given its importance to the Estonian people, just a few words in Estonian will go a long way in making you welcome. You should remember that although many people speak Russian, this does not make them Russian, or even Russian sympathisers. Many patriotic Estonians in the EDF, the government, and across the country spoke Russian as their first language. Indeed, some of the senior military leadership even studied in Russian military academies. Having been occupied and oppressed until relatively recently, it should come as no surprise that many Estonians have learned to mask their emotions. This can be mistaken for them being cold and aloof in attitude. This isn't helped by their direct manner that can easily be mistaken for rudeness and their national inclination to privacy. It is rare to be invited into an Estonian person's home. Underneath, however, lies an often sarcastic sense of humour and a genuine desire for the United Kingdom troops to enjoy living in their country. Just be prepared to work hard at developing friendships and expect brutally honest feedback during AARs. Anyone who met Estonian forces while serving in Afghanistan will know all this to be true. They proved staunch allies, and many friendships formed there have been rekindled by soldiers on Opka Brit. The ravages of the Soviet Union still mark the Estonian countryside. The national attachment to their environment may well be the product of their national desire to protect what is left and rectify this damage. Consequently, oil spills and damage to trees and wildlife are taken very seriously and need to be reported. It would be all too easy to be seen in the same light as the Soviet troops who were once stationed here, as people who do not care about Estonia. Independence is relatively new. Although many of the younger generation have been born into a free Estonia, many, born before 1991, will have memories of living in an occupied country. Their newfound independence has resulted in a tech-savvy, entrepreneurial attitude. Skype is an Estonian invention, for example. It has led to a desire in many to travel and see the world now that the Soviet restrictions have been lifted. There remain, however, some legacies of occupation that are harder to overcome. World War II saw Estonians forced to fight Estonians, in some cases brother against brother, and these wounds have still not fully healed. Commemoration is contentious. There is a bronze statue of a Russian soldier that stands in the Estonian Defence Forces cemetery today. Its move from the Soviet memorial in Tallinn in 2007 led to riots because although the ethnically Estonian population saw it as a symbol of oppression, the Russian-speaking community saw it as symbolizing not only the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany, but their entitlement to equal rights. The memorial to the victims of communism was finished in 2018 to commemorate all those who suffered under communism. Its location, next to the crumbling Soviet memorial to the liberation of Estonia, further illustrates this difference in points of view. As a result, there remain potential rifts in Estonian society that the government are trying hard to overcome, but will become visible to you as you get to know the country. Above all, there remains a very real fear of perceived Russian aggression across the population. This is hard for us to understand. After all, the last time the UK was invaded was in 1066. But when Estonia's history and the public memory of occupation is taken into account, it's easy to see why.